Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to understand someone, the more exhausted you become? The more you chase clarity, the thicker the fog becomes. The more you vow to let go, the deeper you're pulled in. It's not magic on their part. It's a part of you still clutching their image to avoid the mirror. And the price for that avoidance is your peace. When your mind loops on a person, you are not simply thinking about them, you are bumping into the neglected rooms of your inner world. It is the unnamed desire, the shadow you refuse to greet, an archetype stirring from sleep. Carl Jung once believed that every fixation is the unconscious knocking, a reminder that something within remains unfinished. We think we are occupied with another, but in truth we are fleeing ourselves. The way out is counterintuitive. Withdraw your projections, return others to their proper roles, and turn that attention inward. Only then does the grip loosen. Place a steady hand on your fear, look at it squarely, and the inner landscape begins to clear. That first brave glance opens the creaking door to the deeper self. Consider the burden of overthinking. Some days your mind returns to a single face like a chorus on repeat, an invisible record you can't stop. You're at work, and a stray phrase replays. You lie down, and their image arrives dragging a chain of old feelings. The harder you struggle to escape, the tighter those thoughts coil, like cords pulling you toward the center. The weight isn't them, it's letting them live rent-free in your head. Name this a misdirection of psychic energy. Instead of nourishing the self, your life force leaks into a repeating image, a silent whirlpool that can pull you under. Overthinking someone is like shouldering a backpack of stones you cannot see. Each thought drops another stone. Why they said that, why they left, why you weren't enough. By nightfall you are slow and heavy, wondering why your body and spirit are worn. The aching comes not from coincidence but from energy squandered on projection. If you want your life back, look where the mind refuses to look, and you will find, beyond the obsession, the reclaimed quiet of your own soul. Your heartbeat quickens, your breath shortens, your body tenses like an overstretched guitar string, and you think it's all coming from them, when in truth it's the slow wearing down that endless, spinning thought does to you. In psychological terms, this is rumination, a repetitive thinking that is not problem solving, but a trap that tightens the circle until breaking free feels impossible. From Carl Jung's perspective, rumination is not merely a bad habit, but the unconscious attempting to send a message the conscious refuses to hear. Overthinking someone is not excessive caring, but the activation of a part of you you do not fully know and cannot face. The other person serving only as the trigger, while your reaction is the content that must be met head-on. Imagine your mind as a softly lit room. Each person leaves something behind, a scented scarf from the beloved, a scratch mark from the one who hurt. But when you overthink someone, you let them place a great chair in the center and sit there all day, so that you cannot walk without seeing them. You try to focus elsewhere, yet their gaze seems to follow, not because they are present, but because you have amplified their presence into an unbearable occupancy, turning your mind into a space you no longer control, where you tiptoe around the shadow of someone who does not even know they are being thought of. Small everyday scenes expose this burden. A late text becomes an hour, 2 hours, and in your head a whole tragic monologue unfolds. Assumptions, inward probes. Did I say something wrong? Am I not enough? Are they drifting away? While in reality they may be busy, asleep, or driving. Jung's truth echoes here. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. Worse still, this burden warps your value. A message brightens your morning, a distant word ruins your day. Indifference becomes proof of unworthiness. Warmth becomes proof of worth, and you hand another the keys to your emotions without knowing. The more your mind clings, the less you can stand tall on your own. a contraction of the ego described in Jungian psychoanalysis. When the ego weakens, it can no longer hold its place at the center of your life. It is pulled toward the object of fixation until you no longer stand in yourself but circle another, like a planet around a foreign sun. This drift drains you and slowly erodes your true identity. You stop asking what you need and start asking what they think. You stop listening to your feelings and begin searching for meaning in their gestures. Your psychic energy becomes tied to them by an invisible cord, and the more it tightens, the more it wounds. Believe that obsessive thinking signals a loss of contact with the deepest center of the psyche, the self, the source of clarity, strength, and intuition. In overthinking, you are not moving closer to them. You are moving away from yourself, like someone lost in a dark forest, staring at a distant light until the path beneath their own feet disappears. The real danger of overthinking is not the thoughts themselves, but the belief that every thought is true. The mind presents an image and you accept it as fact. It summons a fear and you treat it as destiny. It magnifies a gesture and you read it as a message. All of this unfolds internally, yet the body responds as if it were real. You ache for a pain that has not occurred. You fear an event that has not arrived. You exhaust yourself with conversations that exist only in imagination until clarity dissolves. The burden is not that the person matters too much, but that you have handed the image of them authority over your emotions, your rhythm, your vital energy. You cannot see this weight, but you feel it in your chest, in your body, in every attempt to live, while the mind pulls you elsewhere. The mind becomes light only when you reclaim your center, and that begins by understanding what hides beneath obsession. Overthinking never appears by accident. It always points to a door waiting to be opened. The first door is projection. Projection is the mechanism that prevents release. It occurs when the psyche takes an unrecognized part of you and casts it onto another person, turning them into a screen for what you have not dared to face. What binds you to them is not who they are, but what they awaken within you. What you perceive as their special quality is often your own shadow calling for recognition. Imagine looking through colored glass. Everything outside takes on its hue. You believe you are seeing others clearly, yet you are viewing them through the tints of your unconscious, suppressed desires, unmet longings, unresolved wounds. You are not loving the person before you. You are attached to the image your psyche has created. You might meet someone whose few words bring a sudden calm, and you credit them with a strange healing power, when in fact that ease is a peace you once lost and now recognize in another. You see in them what you cannot find within, and mistake the mirror for the maker. Or you encounter someone who wounds you deeper than usual, a casual phrase that lingers for weeks, a silence that spins 100 fearful scenes, and you blame them for bleeding you dry, when from Carl Jung's view, it is not they who reopen the wound, but an old injury inside you they have unknowingly touched, making the ache feel new. Projection is the trap that keeps you tethered long after reason tells you to leave. You do not cling to the person so much as to the unresolved part of yourself they awaken, repressed hopes that make you wait, abandonment fears that make you grasp, old hurts that make you prove your worth. As Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Projection is like watching a film and forgetting you are the projector. The characters move you only because you supplied the light. Turn off the projector, and the screen goes blank. Withdraw your psychic energy, and the image of that person shrinks back to true size. The cruelest part of projection is not merely how it misreads others, but how it misreads you. You believe you love them, when you are loving a fragment of your soul seeking light. You think you need them for security, when you need the security you abandoned long ago. You feel attraction, when what draws you is an unresolved piece of the unconscious. If a name rises now in your mind, write it down as a small ritual, not to summon them, but to measure how much of yourself you have tied to that name. You cannot escape projection by distraction, by forcing the thoughts away, or by pretending to let go. You run from them and thus run from yourself. But when you stop and look at the part of you you have cast outward, the cord slackens naturally, not because they change, but because the image in your mind does. Projection binds, understanding frees. In the end, you are not truly trapped by another person. You are trapped by the unrecognized parts of your own soul. And as those parts come into sight, the person you fixated on becomes clearer, smaller, and finally true to size, and only then are you free. Number 3, when the ego is overwhelmed by the shadow, projection explains why you see buried parts of yourself in others. But the deeper question is this: why can't you stop your reactions? Why won't the thoughts switch off at the right moment? This is when Carl Jung shadow steps from behind the curtain. The shadow is not only what you refuse to see, it is the invisible pull that can drag the ego from its center, drawing you toward another more powerfully than reason ever could. Once the shadow takes hold, you no longer perceive the world through conscious eyes, but through the abandoned corners of your soul. If projection is the projector casting inner images onto others, the shadow is the power source feeding the machine. It does not ask permission, it simply pulls, and the fragile ego, at the merest touch of an old wound or a small emotion, can slip. The ego wants to think it is in charge, but the shadow knows much of the psychic life lies beyond its reach. Consider an everyday scene. You are steady, kind, composed. Then someone barely ignores you. The ego says, "No matter." The shadow whispers, "They have left you before." From that whisper a fixation grows. You scan every sign, over-interpret every glance, not because the other is important, but because the shadow has been stirred and will not be quiet. Wrote, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The shadow is not only fear and hurt, but also the neglected strengths you will not face: vitality, desire, boldness, freedom. Because the ego has avoided those energies, they funnel outward into the triggering object instead of being reclaimed. One person told me they obsessed over a stranger's gaze, no history, no reason, because that vague image belonged not to the stranger but to a shadowed spark within them. When the shadow takes the wheel, every feeling inflates, a slight distance becomes a chasm, a small sign becomes a drama. You think you are seeing another, but you are staring at a part of your soul that has slept for years. The worst of it is that the ego does not know it has been pulled. It believes the emotion is wholly real, warned that the unrecognized unconscious becomes fate. When the shadow guides the ego, you react not to the present, but to memories, fears, unlived desires, and unnamed expectations. Imagine the shadow as a dark room you always keep locked. Inside that locked room live the parts you have denied: jealousy, the hunger for attention, the longing to be loved, insecurity, anger, fragility. When someone enters your life and unknowingly brushes against that door, the shadow cracks open and everything spills out at once. The ego cannot contain it, so it fastens your attention onto that person to avoid facing what is rising within. This is why you cannot escape their image, not because they hold power, but because you fear confronting the surge inside you. The shadow also manufactures the illusion of uniqueness. You believe only they can make you feel this way, only they can wound you so deeply, only they can stir this restless tension. Yet this is the shadow's deception. It persuades you that the object is the cause, when in truth anyone who touches that buried point could awaken the same intensity. It is not the person who is special, but the part of you hidden for too long, so sensitive that even a light touch shakes your core. When the shadow dominates, you are no longer living your own life, but the life of unhealed fears, unspoken longings, forgotten parts you refuse to face. You grow more reactive, more vulnerable, more prone to obsession, mistaking it for authentic feeling. True emotion does not drain you like this. Only shadow-born emotion leaves such exhaustion. The ego does not need to defeat the shadow, it needs only to see it. Darkness rules only when you turn away. The moment awareness is brought to it, the shadow loosens its grip and becomes integrated, no longer demanding expression through fixation. You feel lighter, steadier, clearer. You are no longer swept away by someone who touches a wound. You stand in yourself, and from that center relate freely. Number 4, archetypes and the mental snare. As the shadow is illuminated, the unconscious forces that once pulled the ego off center come into view, yet there exists a deeper, older power, what Carl Jung called archetypes. These are primordial patterns living in the collective unconscious, beyond time and beyond conscious command. They do not merely influence you, they shape how you resonate with another. Obsession does not always rise from wounds or fear. Sometimes it is an ancient image stirring within. Archetypes move silently, like a melody you cannot hear yet somehow follow. When a person appears who matches that inner music, recognition happens instantly and without reason. They feel familiar, right, uncannily close. You call it intuition, but often it is an archetype awakening. A hidden door swings open inside you, revealing images the ego has never confronted. Pause now and breathe. If someone once felt inexplicably familiar from the very first moment, ask yourself, did that recognition come from them, or from something within you longing to be remembered? Every person is a key, but not every key opens an ordinary door. Some unlock the inner chambers where archetypes sleep. When someone aligns with an archetype you carry, the mother, the father, the lover, the child, the warrior, they instantly swell beyond their real proportion. You no longer perceive only the individual before you, but the inherited emotional memory of humanity itself. You remember not merely the person, but the archetypal image they awaken. You may meet someone gentle and attentive, someone who listens in a way you have never felt heard, and you sense they are extraordinary without knowing why. Often they have stirred the anima or animus within you, the ideal feminine or masculine quality your soul seeks. You believe you love them, yet what you love are the qualities you have longed to embody, blended with their image so completely that it feels like destiny, when in truth it is the psyche searching for its missing part through another's outline. Or you encounter someone confident, decisive, commanding, and the moment they enter the room you feel drawn upward toward them. That pull does not originate in them, but in the hero, warrior, or king archetype asleep within you. The strength you admire already exists in you, but has not been lived, so the other becomes its mirror. You are not captivated by the person, you are captivated by the power you have not dared to awaken. At times you meet someone who awakens an urge to protect, to heal, to remain at any cost. You call it selfless love, yet it may be the caregiver or mother archetype seeking repair. You cling not for them, but because your own nurturing instinct was once wounded and remains unfulfilled. Archetypes lay mental veils over perception, magnifying others beyond their reality. This magnification is the snare. You stop seeing them as they are and begin seeing symbols. An ordinary human, with both light and shadow, is transformed into an icon, a myth, the guardian of a lost key to your soul. You cannot stop thinking because you are not attached to them, but to the archetypal image moving through them. It is like sitting in a darkened theater. You know the actor is not the character, Yet when the lights fade, you surrender to the story. So it is with archetypes. Consciousness dims, the unconscious projects its ancient patterns, and suddenly the connection feels profound, inevitable, fated. But it is the psyche at play. When you believe the story too completely, you enter the trap, constructing an entire narrative the other person does not even know they inhabit. The danger is that archetypes not only inflate others, they shrink you. You feel smaller, weaker, incomplete, convinced they possess what you lack. In that belief, you hand over power. You wait for their recognition, their approval, their presence to awaken what lies dormant in you. You wait for them to complete what was always meant to be lived from within. But the truth is this: the archetype has always belonged to you. No one can hand you what already lives inside your psyche. Think of a familiar scene. You meet someone who makes you feel whole, alive, more yourself than ever before. Beside them, you glimpse a brighter version of who you could be. And when they leave, you feel as if you have fallen into darkness. You believe they carried the light away, but they did not give you that light. They merely reminded you it existed. What hurts is not their absence, but that you have not yet learned to recognize that light without someone awakening it for you. Archetypes are the foundation of the soul, yet when they remain unconscious, they become snares. You confuse spiritual resonance with love, emotional activation with destiny, coincidence with fate. Carl Jung warned that the unconscious does not play games. It presents the images you are meant to confront. But if you cling to the person who carries the image, you lose yourself. The source is never them. It is the archetype within you demanding recognition. Number 5. Why does thinking more hurt? Archetypes may magnify a person in your mind, but it is pain that keeps you attached longer than you realize. And that pain does not come directly from them. It comes from the effort of holding on to something that no longer belongs to you. The tighter the mind grips, the tighter the heart contracts. And when that contraction persists, it becomes the ache you call suffering. You believe you hurt because of them, yet the real struggle is between two forces within you, one desperate to hold on, the other exhausted and ready to let go. Repetitive thinking is like a wound denied rest. Each memory tears the scab away, each replay reopens the injury. Your soul is never allowed to heal. The danger is not the original wound, but how you make it bleed again each day through looping thoughts, like touching a scar repeatedly to see if it still hurts. Pain intensifies when reality is resisted. I once observed that the root of suffering lies in refusing what is. The moment you demand reality conform to your wishes, you enter a battle that cannot be won. Reality remains unmoved, while you are torn apart by the resistance you create. You are not wounded by the person, you are wounded by your expectations. Consider something ordinary. They do not reply. You check your phone again and again, and each time there is silence, a small sting appears. But that sting does not come from them. It comes from the story you tell yourself. Maybe I am not needed. Maybe I am not enough. Maybe I am being replaced. The pain is not their silence. It is the countless meanings you pile onto it. The mind despises emptiness. When information is missing, it fills the gap with tragic narratives and then believes its own invention, suffering over events that exist only in imagination. Another reason the pain persists is that you are wrestling with questions that have no answers. Why did they change? Did they ever love me? What did I do wrong? These questions spin in endless circles. You search for answers in the world, yet reality remains silent. You search in them, yet they are no longer there. You search in your mind, and it manufactures exhausting theories without rest. The pain does not arise because the answer is missing, but because you force yourself to grasp what cannot be known. It is the pain of helplessness, of trying to hold sand in a closed fist. The tighter the grip, the emptier it becomes. At times the suffering comes from refusing to release what has already ended, a relationship that no longer exists, a cherished image, an imagined future that will not unfold. You do not suffer because you lost them. You suffer because you lost the life you envisioned with them. This is the collapse of an unconscious dream. You lose not only a person, but a script into which you poured hope and meaning, and its collapse leaves a hollow silence where certainty once lived. Thinking more also hurts because you view everything from a position of surrender. When fixation takes over, you unknowingly place your emotional fate in another's hands. You wait for their signals to decide whether you may feel joy or despair. Their reactions become your compass. But the moment your happiness depends on another, you abandon your center. No one can live when their soul is outsourced. No one can find peace when their worth is determined elsewhere. Pain deepens further through inner division. One part of you longs to move forward, another clings to the past. One knows you deserve more, another still reaches for what is gone. These opposing forces stretch the psyche like a string pulled too tight, vibrating with tension. And finally, suffering intensifies because you demand it end immediately. Yet emotions do not dissolve on command. They ask to be seen, named, and endured. When you suppress pain, it burrows deeper. When you attempt to dominate thought, it rebels and floods. There is no path around suffering, only through it. Pain is not the enemy. It is a signal that something within you seeks understanding. So how do you reclaim your energy? Never treated the unconscious as an abstraction. He spoke of the return to the self through awareness and deliberate practice. Withdrawing energy from another does not require severing bonds or hardening the heart. It is a quiet, persistent act of drawing the part of your psyche, clinging outward back to its rightful home. This return always begins with a small movement, shifting your gaze inward instead of outward. Thank you for walking with me through this moment of the journey. If these words touch something within you, remain a little longer. What follows are specific practices, simple, yet capable of transforming how you reclaim your energy and restore it to yourself. And if you wish for more journeys like this through the inner world, your support of Echoes of Excellence lets me know you are here, listening, and ready to go deeper. Number 6. Practices for withdrawing energy from others. The first practice begins with noticing where your energy leaks. Each time your chest tightens because they do not reply, each time the mind replays the same old scene, each time you wonder what they think of you. Pause and ask, which part of my energy is flowing outward right now? That single question interrupts the unconscious current and brings awareness in. To recognize that you are giving energy away is already to begin reclaiming it. Consciousness works like light in a dark room. Once you see what is happening, you are no longer pulled blindly. Next, return attention to the body. When the mind fixates, it rushes upward into endless stories, but the body remains rooted in the present. Feel your palms, the breath at the nostrils, the gentle rise and fall of the chest. As attention settles into sensation, it withdraws from the mental screen projecting their image. No one can overthink while truly inhabiting the body. This is how energy moves from the spinning mind back into lived reality. Another practice is to name the real emotion instead of the story. What arises when you think of them is rarely the person themselves, but the feeling they awaken: fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of being insufficient, fear of replacement. Rather than asking why they acted as they did, ask, what am I feeling right now? That question alone turns you back toward your center. Do not analyze or justify. Simply name the feeling: sadness, anxiety, hurt, disappointment. When you stay with a genuine emotion, their image loses its grip, and you no longer chase them to avoid what lives within. Another step is to return the story to its rightful owner. The mind personalizes everything. They fall silent and you assume rejection. They are distant and you assume withdrawal. Yet each person moves within their own inner world. Their actions speak of them, not of your worth. Gently remind yourself, this is their story, not the truth about me. The moment you separate their behavior from your value, you reclaim the power you had surrendered. Create space for silence. Silence is where the psyche restores itself. Sit quietly, allow the breath to move without control, and space opens for energy to settle back into you. In silence, you hear your own voice rather than the echo of theirs. Many avoid silence because it reveals what has been avoided. Yet it is precisely here that the unconscious cords tying you to another loosen. And finally, choose yourself each day, not in words, but in action. To withdraw energy from another, you must rekindle your own inner fire. A psyche that is alive from within is not consumed by another's image. As your inner light grows stronger, their image naturally fades, returning to its rightful size. I once observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. As this journey comes to a close, the question is no longer how to forget someone, but how you have begun to see yourself more clearly. They may still appear, in memory, in dreams, in passing thoughts, yet their position has changed. They no longer occupy the center of your inner room. They return to their proper place, an encounter, a passage, a mirror that has completed its task. And the center, perhaps for the first time in a long while, belongs to you. There will be moments when the mind briefly turns back to them. Let it, the sting is gone. What remains is a quiet gratitude, because through that silhouette you were led back to yourself, and that return is the most essential meeting of your life.